Welcome to the Film Illiterates podcast, your home for uninformed, unfiltered, ill-advised movie talk. I'm your host, Joe Campbell, and joining me today, as always, is Nathan Stone.
Hey, everybody, how's it going?
And Alex Patton.
How's it going?
I was trying to do my best Clint Eastwood impression, but,
Yeah.
I just don't smoke enough or do enough shots of whiskey to.
I should have been coming in here today as Clint Eastwood.
You're also like 50 years younger than him, so I think you got some time to get there.
He was already sounding like that at 30, so.
Fair.
I think he sounded like that his whole life, except for that Creature from the Black Lagoon movie he was in.
I sometimes think that Clint Eastwood, when he was born, was just like born with that voice as a baby, and his parents just hated him.
So today we are talking about a Clint Eastwood movie. It was my turn to pick the movie, and I picked a recent film of his that I just hadn't gotten around to yet. That is 2018's The Mule, the movie where Clint Eastwood smuggles drugs as a 90-year-old guy. And that should be fun. It'll be a first-time watch, I think, for all three of us, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was my first time watching this one, so yeah.
Anyway, we'll be talking about The Mule, directed by and starring Clintford Eastwood.
Is that really his full name? Is Clintford?
No, it's not. I'm just being a jackass.
Eastern Woodford.
Eastern Woodford? That sounds like a whiskey now at this point.
Did Clint Eastwood ever start his own whiskey line? Because I feel like he should have at some point.
I don't know. Good question.
But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what we watched on our own. So since it's my pick a flick, I'll go first this week. So every year I host a movie marathon, triple feature. We watch 3 movies with me and just some friends in the area around Christmas time. And this year we decided Katie and I decided to host a William Castle marathon where we were going to trying to employ some of the gimmicks that William Castle did for some of his movies. So for those unfamiliar with William Castle, he was a filmmaker in the most prevalent during the 1950s through the 1960s. He kind of got into his start doing thrillers. Well, he got started doing stock films for studios like, Westerns and crime films through the 40s. And eventually he saw what Alfred Hitchcock was doing and thought, hey, I could do that. So in the late 50s, early 60s, William Castle kind of reinvented his career by doing thrillers, horror films, that kind of stuff, but with an almost P.T. Barnum-esque flair. Like, William Castle is the showman's version of Alfred Hitchcock. William Castle would do introductions to all of his movies, talking directly to the audience. He would employ gimmicks in the theaters. So what Katie and I tried to do was we tried to replicate some of the gimmicks that he did for the movies that we showed. So the first movie that we showed was The Tingler from 1959, starring Vincent Price. After much hard work, a pathologist discovers and captures a creature that lives in every vertebrate and grows when fear grips its host. Scream for your lives. So this is a fun little creature feature. I'd seen it before. I quite enjoy this one. The basic plot is just, this scientist discovers that when people get frightened, there's a little creature that lives inside all of us, and it feeds on our fear and grows bigger. And if you get frightened enough, it'll break your spine. And that's what you feel, that's spine-tingling terror.
Okay.
And the gimmick he did in this movie was towards the end of the film. There's a moment where there's a scene that takes place in a movie theater, and the tingler gets loose in the movie theater. So the screen would shut off and go all dark. And Vincent Price would say, ladies and gentlemen, there's a tingler loose in the movie theater. And the theater that you would have been watching this movie in, they would have installed little electronic vibrating motors underneath the seats so they would go off.
Oh my gosh, that is like the dickest move you can ever do.
That's awesome.
So that's what Katie and I did, was we installed little vibrating motors in the couch cushions in our house.
One of your friends coming over and it's like, why is the cushion moving?
Yeah. So it was fun. We got a little reaction. The people coming had no idea what was going on. They'd never seen a William Castle movie, and so it was fun. The Tingler, I still say it's a good old fashioned 1950s movie. It's got some really cool little tricks up its sleeve. Just aside from that, the movie's in black and white, but there's a scene that they shot in color, but they painted the set and the actors black and white so that everything still appears
What?
black and white except for some blood that appears in the scene. There's like a bathtub full of blood. So it really
Huh.
messes with your head
That's
because
weird.
yeah, it's just like it's black and white sequence with colored blood, which is pretty cool.
That's weird.
Interesting. And it'd just be one scene they would do, right?
Just one scene. The rest of the movie is completely shot in black and white. That was the only sequence technically shot in color, but shot to look like it was black and white, so they could pull off the effect in
Can
camera.
you imagine actually the actors like prepping for that day? It's like, yeah, we're just doing this one scene, but we're going to be all day looking like black and white in this makeup. That would just been.
I'm just imagining the set designers on that, just having to make sure it looks perfect and no color comes through.
Yeah, that must have been like the worst day of production for everybody on that day. It's like, hours and hours and hours just making sure it's accurate.
So the second movie that we watched in our William Castlethon was 13 Ghosts, which was from 1960. Reclusive Dr. Zorba has died and left his mansion to his nephew, Cyrus, and his family. They will need to search the house to find the doctor's fortune. But along with the property, they have also inherited the cultist's collection of 13 ghosts.
Unlucky number 13.
So 13, 13 Ghosts, honestly, is nothing to write home about plot-wise. We chose it strategically as the middle movie because it is kind of the least interesting of the three movies. But it's got a fun little gimmick where when they showed the movie originally, the ghost sequences would be projected with a blue background, and the ghost would show up as kind of a transparent red. And when you went into the theater, they would hand out these what they called ghost viewers, which are basically those old 3D glasses, anaglyphic 3D glasses with the red and the blue.
Yeah, the first time they were starting to use stereoscopic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So imagine that only instead of glasses, you have a thin strip of red at the top, and this thin strip of red can fit over your eyes, and then below that on the same card is a thin strip of blue. So the idea was that when you're watching the movie and during the ghost sequences, when you look through the red section, you could see the ghosts very clearly. But if you look through the blue section, the ghosts disappear, and you're just watching the scene without the ghosts. It's basically like you're watching like an empty room on the screen.
Huh.
With all these gimmicks that William Castle's employing to all these movies, like how well did they pull off actually for audience members? Like,
Well, I don't know how they worked at the time. I mean, most of these gimmicks were just to kind of sell the movie and say like, "Hey, you've never seen this before. Come to see this new thing we did." And it get butts in the theaters.
yeah, right at a time, I guess, like, when theaters and movies were trying to figure out a way to like, okay, we get people away from their TVs and back in the theater. So like any gimmick they could employ.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering how much of this actually pulled off, like successfully. Like, there's like those 4D theaters today that we deal with where they, have not only motion devices, but also just like water and even just spritz or just like odor smells as well. And sometimes it's a hit or miss depending on the movie. So I'm kind of wondering how successful this was when it's like, here comes the ghost scene. Make sure your glasses are on.
Well, I mean, we had ghost viewers for our screening yesterday.
Oh, okay.
And we handed them
Right,
out,
but
and we watched the movie like that, and it honestly it works pretty well. I mean, if you watch the movie without the ghost viewer in front of your eyes, you can still see the ghosts because they're it's red over blue, but you can see them a hell of a lot better if you look through the red section, and if you put the blue section over your eyes, they for the most part the ghosts disappear. Like there's still a little bit of kind of a thin outline, you can't see them as well. But it's for me, it's actually kind of fun watching that because you can see that they shot the scene with the actors in an empty room, and then they added the
Huh.
ghosts optically after the fact. So it's fun. It's fun
Okay.
for me to kind of just watch. You can watch the scene as if you look through the blue section, you can see just the actors kind of flailing about next to nothing. So I mean, 13 Ghosts, honestly, it's nothing to write home about as a very quote unquote good movie, but it's a fun little kind of haunted house movie. They throw a lot of the tropes of haunted house movies. There's a Ouija board. There's the ghosts going around. It's like the prototype that all other modern day ghost movies seem to follow. So it's all right. If you can get your hands on some ghost viewers and watch the movie that way, I think that just the gimmick adds to the enjoyment of the movie.
I mean, how much are those ghost viewers, like the actual authentic ones that you guys purchased?
I bought some. Someone was making some replications of them on eBay. I think selling them for like $5 a pop, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not
I'm
sure if he's currently selling them right now. They were sold out last week, but maybe he'll make more. So yeah, just
You probably like have the only ones left in the entire world, so it's like you can start jacking up those prices if you want to resell them.
yeah, I'm gonna sell those on eBay.
$30 a pop.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you could also replicate the effect if you just get some old anaglyphic 3D glasses and just like look through one section or the other, with one eye or the other. You can kind of replicate it. So,
Oh, okay.
and then third movie we showed was Homicidal from 1961. A woman named Emily checks into a hotel and offers the bellboy $2,000 to temporarily marry her. We soon find out that Emily is the caretaker of a wheelchair bound mute named Helga, who was the childhood guardian of a pair of siblings, Miriam Webster and her half brother Warren, who was about to inherit the estate of their late father.
Well, that bellboy probably did not get his money's worth.
So, Homicidal. William Castle released Homicidal. Basically he saw Psycho and he said,
Mhm.
"Hey, I want to make a movie about a psycho killer too."
I bet he's just like watching everything Alfred Hitchcock's doing. Is like, ooh, I bet I can outbeat him.
more
And then
more
Alfred
or
Hitchcock's
less. That was a good chunk of William Castle's career was aping Hitchcock.
and I can just imagine Hitchcock just watching his movies like, cute kid, cute.
Yeah, so I'm like, don't get me wrong. None of William Castle's movies live up to the caliber of Hitchcock, but there is something very charming about seeing this guy who just wants to have fun and make a good time in the theater and pulls all these cute gimmicks, that kind of stuff. So,
Mhm.
Homicidal is definitely along that line. It's the more restrained out of the three movies that we watched. It is kind of more deliberate in how it unveils the plot. There honestly isn't a whole lot of killing in the movie. It opens up with a fantastic kill, and there's some great stuff towards the end. But most of the middle section is just learning about these characters and the relationships between these characters. And there's kind of some oddball touches, like there is the mute caretaker in her wheelchair, and she talks with a little hammer that she like taps, kind of like that guy from Breaking Bad with his bell,
Oh, okay.
something like that. And it's got this just this crazy lady with a knife, and what's her deal? It's a very enjoyable movie for me. I think a lot of people will be kind of bored by the middle section because again, there is really a whole lot of action, but it is kind of fun to kind of piece together, and it does have a little surprise ending, which I've seen a lot of people talk online about how like, oh yeah, I saw that coming. I didn't see it coming the first time I watched it. I was like, whoa, okay, I didn't know this is where they were going with it, which is kind of cool. One of the people in our group yesterday did figure it
Mhm.
out halfway through, and she was just like giggling to herself the whole week because she was like, "Oh, okay, now this all makes sense of where they're going with it." Like she was like in on
Oh,
the
okay.
secret,
See,
you know.
so overall, what
Mhm.
you're saying is William Castle's just one of those directors who he just found his little niche with audiences and just he made it work to his sensibilities as just a filmmaker. Just like, I'm going to tell stories, get everyone engaged.
Yeah, he's an auteur who just likes having fun, basically,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
he
we need
likes
more of
Hitchcock.
those.
Yeah, and the gimmick behind Homicidal is that just before the climax of the movie,
Mhm.
the film actually like stops itself, and a clock shows up on the screen counting down 45 seconds, and you hear William Castle's voice saying, "All right, if anybody's too scared to see the end of the movie, you can leave now and get your refund." And in the theaters, they would set up a little cardboard display called the Coward's Corner out in the lobby. And so the idea was that, like, hey, if you're too scared, you can bring your little ticket that says that you're a coward. You can turn it in and get your monies back if you go to the Coward's Corner. So we built a replication of the original Coward's Corner and set it up just for fun.
Nice.
Dang, Joe. I mean, it sounds like you go all out with these movie-a-thons. Like, I mean, I know Alex and I are in San Diego, but, man, we got to get up to Washington and see some of
Oh my
this.
gosh, it would be great if we could do something like this with you guys up here. I mean, we honestly don't usually go that all out with these movie marathons. But Katie and I were watching William Castle movies last year, and we were like, we got to try to pull out some of these gimmicks. It'd just be kind of fun, you know. No one's really doing these days. So anyway, yeah, I highly recommend Homicidal. I quite enjoy it, and yeah, just check out the movies of William Castle. He's got a lot of fun stuff in there. So I'll pass it on. Sorry, I went on much longer than I usually do, but I just kind of wanted to go into what we were
Hey,
doing
no,
this
you're
week.
good. All right. Well, I guess, Alex, do you want to go next?
Sure. Recently, I watched the documentary AlphaGo. The ancient Chinese game of Go has long been considered a grand challenge for artificial intelligence. Yet in 2016, Google's DeepMind team announced that they were going to be taking on Lee Sedol, the world's most elite Go champion. AlphaGo chronicles the team as it prepares to test the limits of its rapidly evolving AI technology. The film pits man against machine and reveals as much about the workings of the human mind as it does the future of AI. Um, this one's actually this is actually free on YouTube. I assume probably because it's about Google's team. Makes sense for it to be free on YouTube. But I recommend it. For being a free documentary, it's only 90 minutes. Doesn't take too long. But I just found it pretty fascinating. I mean, I'm not super into AI and whatnot, especially if it's presented well enough, and it is presented quite well in the documentary. Um, I could really hold my attention, and it did. Um, the there was one thing that I didn't really quite like, in that the movie, it starts out as you're following the Google team behind the AI. They're the guys who made it. You learn all about them. You get to see where they work. You talk to them and whatnot, and all that kind of stuff. And so the documentary has you starting out rooting for them, because you want to see them. You want to see the project go well. You want to see it actually work. And then as you start getting into the actual match, which is, by the way, it's not like just a one match of Go. It's what I think it's best out of 5, or not best out of 5. They just play 5 matches.
So I'm not familiar with like how Go is. I mean, it sounds like is it a virtual game? Is it something
No,
like you
this is
okay, so it is in person.
this is an ancient game. It is
Okay.
more complex than chess.
It's
Oh, I
it's
see.
with little black and white pebbles, isn't that right?
Yeah, essentially. There's
Oh, okay.
like a square grid out in front of you, and you place pebbles. I'm trying to remember the description of the game because I didn't entirely understand it while watching it. I got the gist of it enough, but
Mhm,
essentially you place these black or white pebbles.
mhm,
One person has each color, and essentially you want to create these little like pockets of just space, surrounded by your pebbles. And I
mhm.
think it's whoever holds the most like protected space on the board, wins. I think, if I remembering correctly, I think that's like the point of the game. There's obviously some different things and whatnot that you can do with it, but that's the general gist of the game. It's like an ancient game. It's been super popular mostly in Asia and whatnot. So,
Mm.
but anyway,
Okay.
like I said, it's long stood as like a pinnacle achievement for AI to be, because chess has already been conquered.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess like the reason why I asked is like,
Mhm.
if it has some kind of like a physical element where you can watch and see a person's, either they're progressing or they're getting defeated, you can at least see that on the screen. Like, there is that visual element.
Yeah.
Okay.
So back to what I was saying is, like, the movie sets it up, or the documentary sets it up as you're following the team that designed the AI, and you're rooting for them. You want to see it actually work well. You're on their side. And as the documentary progresses, it's throwing in parts where you start rooting for Lee Sedol, like Go champion,
Hmm.
as it's kind of being presented as, like the description, the synopsis said, as man against machine, and not just like, oh, it's just him as a person, but the documentary, I guess, with help from like media outlets and whatnot at the time, it kind of gets presented as humanity versus a machine. And so you're thinking, oh shit, I want humanity to win, but wait, I want the deep mind AI team to win. Oh, but people.
It built, yeah, it built up like where basically it's no longer favoring one person as the underdog. It's like you can see either of them. Like you want both the sides to win, but one can't.
Exactly. Yeah. It kind of threw you back and forth, and I didn't quite like it as much. The whole,
Really? I mean, I kind
yeah.
of like when there's a competition like that, and it's not just one sided with that. I don't know. And you always pick really good documentaries for us to look at and watch. So I'm like, you know what? I might want to check this out now.
Hey, like I said, I recommend it. It's free. You can
That's
just watch
true.
it right now, and it's only 90 minutes, so it's not super long. But yeah, it is a very like well-made documentary. It's not some like just kind of shitty. Just let's just grab a phone camera and record some interviews. No, it's actually quite cool.
Yeah. Oh, especially if it's Google that's backing this up or producing or distributing it. It's like, yeah, they're going to put the money out there for this.
Exactly.
Unless they shot everything on their Google Pixels, which that
No,
might have
I
been
don't.
that
No, it
would have been
actually was not.
advertisement.
No, they actually have legitimate cameras for this. Surprise, surprise! Because this was released back in 2017. I think the Go match was in 2016. So anyway, you can find also more stuff like about the DeepMind AI. They have a YouTube channel where they actually pitted the AI against professional StarCraft players, which was also kind of cool to see. The other movie I watched was I just watched it yesterday. I watched Black Death.
Ooh, sounds dark.
Yeah, it is. As the plague decimates medieval Europe, rumors circulate of a village immune from the plague. There is a talk of a necromancer who leads the village and is able to raise the dead. A fearsome knight, joined by a cohort of soldiers and a young monk, are charged by the church to investigate. Their journey is filled with danger, but it's upon entering the village that their true horror begins. It's got Sean Bean in it, which is great. I'm pretty sure you can guess what happens to him.
Oh, he lives?
Yeah, dude, it's the one movie where he lives.
What a
Hell
twist!
yeah.
That's a
That's
twist
the one
ending.
movie he lives.
Oh, Eddie Redmayne's in this too.
Yeah, he is.
Mhm.
He's okay in it, actually. I didn't really care for his character all that much. Like
Wasn't this a movie before he became like a breakthrough actor?
I think so.
Like he was still kind of like an unknown.
This was back in 2010. So yeah, it was like probably just before. The movie's actually a lot more violent than I thought it would be, which is I was okay with. I thought that was kind of cool. But overall, I don't. It really just didn't feel like it amounted to much. At the end of the movie, I was just kind of left wanting for a little bit more, I guess, just character resolution, and there wasn't all that much of it. Eddie Redmayne's character was fine. I just don't. I didn't like his acting in this very much. I just don't think
Yeah.
he carried the character very well at all.
Honestly, I'm looking at the director's kind of like filmography, Christopher Smith.
Mhm.
He doesn't have a lot of great stuff under his belt. Actually, I think it looks like between Get Santa and just recently, he hasn't done a whole lot. Maybe just a lot more just TV episodes.
I have
and
seen his
serials.
movie Severance, actually. I didn't realize he was the same guy. That movie kind of sucked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Triangle Creep. Yeah, not a lot of like great stuff on his belt.
Just by judging the movie covers alone, I'd say Black Death probably might be the best, but that's really not saying a whole lot because it's fine. Like the movie's okay.
Yeah.
It's got Sean Bean in it, which is like he's great in like any kind of like medieval thing. His like cohort of soldiers is I actually quite liked all of them. They were all like really good, but like yeah, like I said, the main issue I had was like the story. The character just didn't feel like didn't have much resolution at the end. Eddie Redmayne wasn't that great, and then like the main like villainess, Carice Van Houten, she was kind of okay. It was hard to kind of like get a judge on her character just because of the way she just acted the character, and that could probably come down to how it was written, but yeah, it was just all right. There was there's good moments, but there's a lot of like kind of off moments, and overall just kind of mid.
I'm curious, how did this come across your radar, Alex?
A friend of mine threw it on. Every weekend I watch movies with some Discord friends. And this is one of the ones that one of my friends threw on. So we just sat down and watched it. I had not heard about it. Not that I can remember before watching it. Yeah.
I was gonna say I think I remember seeing trailers for this back when it came out, but I mean, other than that, I haven't. It's not the sort of thing I've ever thought about until you just brought it up just now. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it does seem like kind of like it's just one of those sort of forgotten movies, where it was neither terrible enough for people to remember it or good enough for people to remember it.
Yeah, it was just a kind of just slipped right past through everything. A real sleeper, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Well, yeah. Lastly, I started a new anime series called My Dress Up Darling. It's really great. So the synopsis is traumatized by a childhood incident with a friend who took exception to his love of traditional dolls. Doll artisan hopeful. Uh, man, I should read these names before and actually get the
I know he's
pronunciation.
just butchering them up.
Wakana Goju passes his days as a loner, finding solace in the home ec room at his high school. To Wakana, people like beautiful Marin Kitagawa, a trendy girl who's always surrounded by a throng of friends, is practically an alien from another world. But when Chio from Marin, never one to be shy, spots Wakana sewing away one day after school, she barges in with the aim of roping her quiet classmate into her secret hobby, cosplay. Yeah.
I had a feeling it was going to go in that direction. Of course, it would be a stab at cosplayers.
It's great. What do you mean?
Yeah, the way you're describing it so far with this guy who's just like kind of into home ec and into sewing and stuff, I'm like, and then it's like, oh, it's cosplay. I'm like, of course.
Honestly, the cosplay aspect was much. I haven't seen that before in. I don't know. I actually really don't watch all that much anime or read all that much manga, but that was kind of a unique thing that I hadn't really myself read or watched before.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, just to throw it out there, I'm a cosplayer too.
Yeah.
I have some friends who do it as well. And I'm already kind of guessing what the show kind of dwells in quite a bit is like, how accurate is this? Or, oh, I like how you did the seam and all that. So for me, I'm just like, I just got mine off of Amazon,
It does drill. And there's 3 episodes out right now. I think the 3rd episode just came out I think it came out like yesterday. So I've only seen up to the first 2 episodes right now. It's just a very it's just a super cute anime. The animation itself as well is surprisingly nice for like a slice of life romance. I really kind of wasn't expecting that because mostly slice of life romance, they don't really get that much like really nice animation. I mean, generally you'll have more of the like the shonen action stuff. Think obviously like Attack on Titan and Demon Slayer that'll have a little bit more attention paid to the animation style, but the studio that did this, Cloverworks, they've also done Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, as well as Darling in the Franxx, one of my favorite series. I mean, they're a good studio, and it's cool to see them put like this much effort into what's probably going to amount to be your general like rom-com slice of life stuff. But I'm all for it, honestly. That's my kind of shit.
All right. Well, usually, like I said, I'm always weary about which animes I might get into. I kind of refer to you or my bro when it comes to that. But if this is one, it sounds a little bit up my alley. I'll take a look, but no guarantees.
It does have a good amount of ecchi in it, so just a heads up.
Okay.
There's serious fan service.
Joe is already kind of like, I kind of know what that means.
I'm in.
He's saying.
Let's go.
So Alex, where are you watching?
I'll let you weeds discuss
on Verve,
that.
do you want my account information? I'll give it to you.
Oh my gosh, is Verve still a thing?
Verve is still a thing.
I didn't realize. I had Verve like forever ago to watch
when they actually had stuff.
I used to watch Harmon Quest, and that was it.
Yeah. As a side note to this, Verve has gone to like kind of just shit. They have nothing anymore. They have Crunchyroll. They have Mondo. That is it. That is all Verve is.
Can you find Crunchyroll on HBO Max though too, or some?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, Verve is Crunchyroll though. That's the thing. Verve is owned by Crunchyroll. It's a separate streaming service that used to have Crunchyroll, Funimation. Used to have like actually Rooster Teeth stuff. Mondo was there as well back then, as well as like a couple other like movie channels, like a bunch of like artsy kind of stuff. It used to have a lot, and then Funimation left. They picked up High Dive, which is another anime service, and then eventually lost them. And now it's literally just down to Crunchyroll and Mondo. And Crunchyroll has been bought out by Funimation and Sony as well. So I have no idea what's going to happen to Verve, dude.
Okay, that makes sense because I know HBO Max has a Funimation section to it, so I guess they're just kind of all over the place these days.
Okay.
I was surprised to hear it was still around, honestly.
Quite honestly, I'm surprised it is still around as well, so not the only one.
All right, Nate, what you got?
Well, now that you girls are all done prattling, all I can say is I decided to revisit a movie that When I did my, I guess, letterbox review of it, I didn't give it a great review. I wasn't too fond of it. But after it winning the Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture Drama, I decided to try to watch it again and see if there was anything I missed. And that was Jane Campion's Western, The Power of the Dog.
Ooh, nice.
So when I wrote it, I kind of gave it a bad review. I was telling people like it's basically almost feels like Brokeback Mountain, but it's, Doctor Strange on a ranch.
Nice.
Oh, and also there's cow castrations as well.
I'm in.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so overall, I can say it's a well done movie. I can't riff on Jane Campion for being a good director. She knows how to direct movies, and when she goes for style, she makes it work. And this is shot very well. It's just I didn't care too much for the story. The story is just it feels very basic. It didn't really do anything more to it. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch, he's a great actor, and I think he plays the part of Phil very well. And he's with an interesting cast as well. I mean, you have Kirsten Dunst, you have Jesse Plemons in it as well. And Cody Schmidt-McPhee, who plays the son. He's good too. Yeah, all I can say about it is it's just not something I cared for. And I think that's just my big reason for why I didn't care for the review. And I can see why it might garnish a lot of awards this season. It feels like it's the big kind of like award acclaimed movie that Netflix is really trying to push for. Aside from that, it's acted well, shot well. You have Johnny Greenwood doing the music again, which I kind of feel like modern Western is really his forte.
Which is odd because he doesn't make Western music.
No, well, I mean, he did. Back in the day, he did "There Will Be Blood," and I love the score for that.
Sure, I guess outside of his soundtrack,
right,
in Radiohead.
Exactly, yeah. If anyone's not familiar, Johnny Greenwood is the lead guitarist and one of the main songwriters of Radiohead. So when he started dabbling into kind of like composing for motion picture scores, it was kind of interesting. He does break away from a lot of conventions, and this one is not bad. Like I said, it's good. I can just say the one thing that I think is the big thing about this is the acting is done very well. Aside from that, the story I really don't care for, and I kind of almost feel like with all this hype and all this acclaim it's getting, that the story could have explored something more or done something more other than just everyone being out there on a Montana ranch, just with Benedict Cumberbatch harassing everybody verbally and, in weird ways, just like kind of like being a weird closet case, rancher. So, but yeah, let's see. The last thing I'll talk about is I kind of started watching this other show on Netflix called You. Basically, It's a story about a lonely bookkeeper becomes infatuated with a girl he meets for the first time, to the point where stalking her and taking care of her drug-induced boyfriend becomes an obsession of his. So this is a strange one. I didn't realize the show had 3 seasons already, but it's written very well to the point where I almost hate that we like this guy so much. It's, basically he's stalking her, and he does a lot of stuff in it that's not okay. And I don't say it gives off Dexter vibes, but it does get to that territory. But it does explore a lot of things like, in this, millennial day and age, what is it that people want out of relationships? Like, it's not just looking at the issues he has with kind of having this very unhealthy fascination and obsession with this girl, but also you look at the girl as well and what she's willing to do just to get through in life, what kind of behaviors, what kind of men she's, putting herself through. And you see it on both sides, the problems of it. And it tries to address that. I just think it gets to that creepy territory where you're watching him kind of like, when him and her have their moments together, it's very romantic comedy and it's all sweet and all. But then you have to remind yourself, yeah, you abducted her boyfriend and keeping him in your basement and, starving him to death. I'm only like a few episodes in, but it's written very well. I just have to say, be prepared to kind of just get into some creepy territory.
Yeah.
And that's it.
With that, we will move on to our main review, which is Clint Eastwood's The Mule.
Need help, sir?
Oh, officer, hi.
You need help?
No,
Earl?
I'm fine, thank you.
What do you got there?
Well, pecans. I delivering pecans to my niece in Syria.
Pecans?
Yeah, pecans. She makes the worst pecan pie you've ever tasted. I feel sorry for her husband, and I feel sorry for the pecans too.
Earl Stone, a man in his 80s, is broke, alone, and facing foreclosure of his business when he is offered a job that simply requires him to drive. Easy enough, but unbeknownst to Earl, he's just signed on as a drug courier for a Mexican cartel. He does so well that his cargo increases exponentially, and Earl hit the radar of hard-charging DEA agent Colin Bates. I feel like whoever wrote the synopsis on Letterboxd did not do a great job this time.
Of course, he'd be hacking someone else's summary or review.
I ain't got time to write my own summary. So yeah, this directed by Clint Eastwood, stars Clint Eastwood, Bradley Cooper, Lawrence Fishburne, Michael Pena, and a whole bunch of other actors.
Like Diane Weiss,
Andy Garcia.
Andy Garcia.
Andy Garcia. Yeah. I'll have to admit, I actually was surprised when Andy Garcia did show up in there. I was like, oh, Abe, it's him. How you doing?
I like to think that this is a sequel to 8 Million Ways to Die, and Andy Garcia is just playing the same crazy drug kingpin that he was in that movie. So I'll start off my initial thoughts. I had never seen this one before. I'm actually falling a little bit behind on Clint Eastwood's more recent directorial stuff. I think prior to this, the most recent one that I'd seen was American Sniper.
Okay.
So, I hadn't seen Sully, hadn't seen Richard Jewell, that 1517 to Paris, just looking through his filmography. Hadn't seen that one.
Well, that one you can just totally bypass.
That's what I've heard.
It's a horrible movie.
But so, and this was one, I honestly just kind of picked this one for my pick this week, almost completely at random off of my watch list of movies. And I thought, hey, you know what? I haven't seen the Mule. That one had piqued my interest just because I was like, oh, old drug runner for the Mexican cartel. That sounds kind of interesting. And Clint Eastwood could do that kind of role pretty well, I thought. So I had no preconceptions going in, except for I, for some reason, thought that at some point he was going to smuggle drugs in his butt.
And he didn't. And we were all disappointed.
I attribute that mistake to there's another movie called The Mule that involves a guy having to pass drugs through his system and hold it in for a while.
I'm kind of curious to know exactly what your cues look like, Joe, on your film watch. Like you have one line of like stuff that looks like okay, film goers would watch, and then you have this other category of weird insertion movies.
You don't want to see my watch list.
I don't. I really don't.
And then about 15 minutes before the end of the movie, my brain went, "Oh, that's not going to happen in this movie, is it?" I should have been queued up early on. But so I kind of have an inkling of where you guys are going to land on this. So I'm going to start this off on probably the most positive note of this review.
Good.
Is I didn't love this. I got a lot of problems with it, which I'll get into in the bulk of the review. I still enjoyed it. Out of 5 stars, I gave it 3.5. I could bump it down to a 3, but I for the most part, I enjoyed this movie. It's Clint Eastwood's character I feel like it's one of the most relaxed roles he's done, which could translate to lazy performance to some people. I thought his character was one of the most interesting ones I've seen from him recently, because it isn't the hard-hitting, gritty, kind of scowling character. He is just kind of like a mild-mannered grandpa type character who happens to fall in with the wrong people and is just doing a job for them. And at a certain point, he's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. Oh, well, I'll just roll with it. So I enjoyed seeing this side of Clint Eastwood that isn't kind of the hardened badass, but is just kind of like a milder guy. And, Bradley Cooper is there and he's doing fine. I think our friend Nick was saying that he did this right after doing Silver Linings Playbook or around that time. So it's kind of like this is like his taking a break movie.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from basically just not doing anything romantic comedy related or hangover related. Like, yeah.
Yeah, the movie is. I mean, it's got some real serious pacing issues. I was excited going into this thing. It was under 2 hours long, thinking, great, not like a 2.5 hour long movie. And then it felt too long for me. There's two sides to his character in this movie. There's his, he's struggling with his family life, but then he's also running drugs for the Mexican cartel. And there's a certain point where it kind of feels one-sided in that, oh, it's all about his running drugs, and now all of a sudden it's all about his family stuff, with not breaking up the two very evenly. And towards the end there, it did kind of feel a little bit too long to me. And that there are inconsistencies with his character. I didn't feel like I really got a good idea of who this guy really was. Like, I thought I had a grasp on this character, but I really didn't towards the end there. So yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect movie. Fairly enjoyable. Yeah, I I thought it was fine. I thought it was perfectly fine.
I mean, that's good. I'll go next, and I'll be gentle. I was not a big fan of this, so I like Clint Eastwood. I like his movies. Kind of like Joe, I've seen quite a few of them throughout all of his career. Kind of like you see Million Dollar Baby, you see Mystic River, Richard Jewell, even Gran Torino, which honestly I think that one so much superior than this one was. And kind of like with you, I have issues with the writing of this. In one of my comments I put down here, it says, it feels like this is a first rough draft of a movie that could have been perfect. And in my opinion, I think the issue I have with this, Joe, it's more than just, scene choices or pacing choices. It's dialogue. There's some dialogue on here that's kind of just so painful to listen to. And I'm looking at the IMDb. Nick Sneck, he's done a lot of scripts for Eastwood, more recent projects that he's been working on. And I also look at here, he was also a writer on Narcos, which doesn't make sense. You have Narcos, that's a really good drug cartel drama series, great writing. And then you look at this and you're like, what happened? And my impression I have with Eastwood is he's just one of those powerhouse director actors now at this point. He knows his style. He knows what he likes. He knows how he wants to shoot things and the team he works with. I just kind of feel like this was like a small little project he just wanted to do just in between when probably he was doing like American Sniper or another movie that he was coming out with. And he's just getting to that point now where he doesn't care. He doesn't want permission from Hollywood to like, oh, you guys don't want me to make a movie like this? Well, screw you. I'm still going to do it. But my problem with this movie is it feels like it's one of those movies that it was not really, it wasn't at its prime. It's like they probably kind of rushed it. And I feel it a lot in everyone's performances as well. Like Bradley Cooper, he's a good actor, but there was one line he delivered where he's talking to Lawrence Fishburne and he just gives like this sigh of like, why am I saying this line? And I kind of felt with him. I'm like, yeah, dude, I don't know why either. So my impression of this is this felt like it could have been a better movie if maybe the writing was a little bit better or if there was a better intent for why is this movie being directed.
I can agree with that. The movie is made, it is made competently well on a technical level. All the camera work is fine. All the acting is, in my opinion, all the acting was fine. But man, is it really just kind of bland?
Yeah, that's the biggest issue with this is it's a bland watch. And I don't know if it's Eastwood, his performance, or it's just there wasn't enough to keep you invested or to build up the stakes. Because it got to this point where it's like you kind of already know what the outcome is going to be. But there's no surprises, there's nothing really challenging you as an audience or exciting you. It's like everything's kind of playing it safe in a weird way. I mean, I guess that's another thing. I was like, this is not really a cartel movie. This feels like a safe cartel movie.
Yeah. It's Clint Eastwood. He's got to make it, kind of okay and just like to sell to studios, and he's just kind of be a little bit, like I said, bland and not like taking these super crazy risks and whatnot. But
yeah, but I guess if anything, like I've seen other stuff he's directed, which it could have been a bland premise. Like let's take American Sniper, for example. A good part of it is really Bradley Cooper, waiting to take a shot. But somehow the stakes of that, how it's directed, the pacing of it, what you realize what's going on in the scene increases and it escalates the tension. With this, it didn't feel like it had the tension. And I don't know if it's because you're dealing with Clint Eastwood, but also something I didn't buy. This is one thing I did not buy is how late it was for him realizing that he's smuggling drugs in the back of his
Dude,
truck.
yeah.
I mean, at
I-
some point when he does the first round and he comes into the garage and he sees these guys with guns, he could probably already start. He's a smart dude. He's a businessman. He could probably understand, like, okay, something about this doesn't seem right. I would have probably, after the first realizing, okay, I got all this cash in my glove box now. I need to really kind of investigate the next time. Was it like the third or the fourth trip that he started? Is like, oh my gosh, there's drugs back here. I'm like, well, how long
Dude,
did it take?
that was literally one of my notes. Is like so he just goes like on the first run is just like, okay, so he just goes along with it like that, huh? I'm
Mhm.
like, come on, like surely he isn't that dumb. Like, he's old, he's got experience, life experience and whatnot. He's not that dumb.
No.
And then later on, because they always tell him, don't look in the bag, and the idiot opens the bag. And I'm like, why? Why are you surprised that it's drugs? Like, what? How'd you not figure this out already?
I see. I think I had a kind of a different reading into his mindset than you guys did, because I kind of took it to be kind of like, during the first round, I thought he was kind of catching on, like, this is kind of sketchy. I don't know what's going on here. I think this is what's going on, but I'm not sure. But I just kind of read that as he was going along with it, even though he knew that, oh yeah, they're delivering something I'm not supposed to, drugs, guns, I don't know what. But I kind of felt like it was just kind of like he was in a set mindset where he's just kind of like, I don't want to know. I'm getting paid really well. I may be curious, but I don't want to get into it. And then his curiosity got the better of him, and he opened up, and it was kind of like just like that confirmation of like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of drugs right there. Oh geez, oh gee willikers.
Literally, I think he said something like
Dude.
that. Like,
But then the other thing is too is like he just continues going along with it. Like, I guess I don't know if I don't really know if running drugs like that pays out that much, because he like comes up with 25K with like out of thin air all of a sudden. Yeah, I'm not so sure. But anyway, but yeah, he just keeps going along. Like, we get the idea of it in the beginning where he's like paying for part of his daughter's wedding, and like paying to fix up the restaurant and stuff like that. So we kind of get to the idea that, okay, I guess he is doing it for the money, but then we're never shown after that what he's doing with the money when he's getting a lot more of it.
Yes, I agree with that.
It's like,
Yeah.
why does he continue doing it? He's very likely gotten quite a large sum just sitting at home right now. So we don't really know why he continues doing it, especially with how old he is. And that didn't really make sense to me. It's just like, why is he still going?
So one of my big problems with this movie is his character. So I was initially interested in him at the beginning when I saw that, okay, people put such a big emphasis, his family puts an emphasis on the fact that he puts work over family. He loves his work. He works with plants. It's just kind of what he puts all his time into. And you get the idea that he's been neglecting his family because he's been so absorbed in his world of plants, which is just what he enjoys doing. And then he realizes that, oh, I haven't been there for them and my business is struggling. So here, I'll take this job, get some extra money, and maybe I get the idea that he wants to buy his way back into the family, which kind of becomes a theme later on. But you're right, Alex, in that, at a certain point he's just kind of throwing money around, and everyone's like, hey, Earl's super rich now. Let's not ask any questions about that.
Like, his ex-wife sees he has he's a real thick like gold bracelet, and she's like, where'd you get that? And he's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, what?
yeah, of course you should be worried about it.
He's just like blinged out. Just showed up to a movie theater.
So early on, I thought like, okay, this guy has just neglected his family. He's been absorbed in his work, and now he's trying to make right by doing the wrong thing. It's like kind of the Breaking Bad thing. But then he suddenly becomes all about like, oh, I just love enjoying the moment. And you see him sleeping with prostitutes and
Mhm.
Yeah.
he's just kind of hanging out and taking his time around places. And I'm like, this
Like,
seems
hey,
at odds with
yo.
the guy that we've like for a guy that's trying to get back in with his family. All of a sudden, he's just kind of like, I'm just here to have fun. I don't really care what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's why I agree with you, Joe, especially on that, because I feel like that's where the writing I think suffers in this. I think if the guy who does was the scriptwriter for this taking this originally, I guess it was based off of like a news article that Clint Eastwood read, and he's like, I want you to make a movie about this, and they write it. But I feel like he didn't have that. It wasn't really clear about his character arc. Like, what is this guy? And I think if they had just stuck with the reason why he left his family is because he liked being loved by everybody else. He traded the love of, people and the love of life and the love of pleasure over people who do matter, which is family. And there was this moment, I think, when he's at Andy Garcia's mansion for the party, and he's talking with the son afterwards. And I wrote this down, like this was a missed opportunity where maybe it was the son to convey to him, it's like, no, I have to stick with this. This is my family. This is all I have. And that would have bestowed on Eastwood's character, like, oh, interesting. This kid could have it all. He could go off and do his own thing, but he's choosing to stick by his dad for life. Interesting. I think like if they had written that a bit more clear, even just more better for that scene, it would have been a way to like show, hey, this is where he needs to grow. This is where he needs to change.
Mhm. I agree that actually would have been could have been a pretty monumental scene in the movie.
I have qualms with this, but also I think the movie was more entertaining because of it. Is that there were quite a few instances of just really contrived tension, like coincidental stuff would happen to drive the tension up. So, for instance, the
Mhm.
first time he pulls over, opens up the trunk to look, and he sees all the drugs. Coincidentally, a cop pulls up right behind him to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
how's it going? Hey,
Wow.
I got my drug sniffing dog in the car."
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where, like, I watched it, I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of a hilariously coincidental." On the other hand, I mean, the scene would have been really boring if he just pulled over. Hey, there's drugs. Anyway, let's keep driving on. Or there's another scene like that where he's at the hotel and Bradley Cooper knows that the person running drugs is staying at this hotel, but he doesn't know which person it is. And Bradley Cooper kind of zeroes in on this one guy that he thinks might be the drug runner. And then he happens to bump into Clint Eastwood, but Clint Eastwood literally just like opens his door and says like, "Hey, how's it going? Good." And then he
Yeah.
closes the door again, and it's just kind of like a lot of stuff like that would keep happening, and it was frustrating. But at the same time, again, like I think the movie was more entertaining for it. So I don't know which I would have rather. I think I would have rather have had it written more seamlessly, so that it didn't feel as out of nowhere. But it is what it is.
Yeah, like I kind of have a feeling like there's a lot of like good intent with a lot of the writing behind this. I think the movie might have just been one of those scripts where they rushed a first draft only because like, oh, we won't have this time again in Clint Eastwood's schedule, and he really wants to make this movie now, so let's just try.
Family's the most important thing. Don't do what I did. I put work in front of family. I thought it was more important to be somebody out there than the damn failure I was in my own home.
Regarding Clint Eastwood as a filmmaker, he is really just kind of a workhorse of a
Mhm.
director. I mean, I'm thinking about Nate. You were talking about American Sniper earlier. I love American Sniper. I think, but even in American Sniper, there are stuff that I mean, it's not a flashy movie. That movie is built on the writing and Bradley Cooper's performance and the
Mhm.
characters. It is just kind of a very straightforward shot movie. I just remember everyone talks about the fake baby in American Sniper, where
Mhm.
there's a scene where Bradley Cooper's walking around holding his baby, and it's so obviously just like a baby doll, but
Mhm.
they're shooting it, kind of trying to hide it, but it's still really obvious. That didn't bother me because the characters are what makes it work. Clint Eastwood honestly just doesn't give a fuck. He's just kind of like, you know what? We'll shoot it
Yeah.
real quick. This will be the easiest, quickest way. We'll get this scene done. Move on to the next scene. We're on a budget. We're on a time schedule. So I think that's kind of been his style. I don't know if that's always been his style. It's certainly been his style since Gran Torino, where he's kind of like get in, get the job done, move on. And he might, be invested in the characters. He might like everything about the story, but he's there to shoot a movie, and he's very no nonsense about it.
Yeah, I would have to say after Gran Torino is when he really stapled. That's his trademark style. Like
Yeah,
before, I mean, everyone probably knows like he won the Oscar for $1 Million Baby, which is being seen always as like a controversial movie, despite it kind of like following his style. And even like up when he was like starting on his career as a director with Unforgiven, he's kind of dabbled back and forth with different genres. But I think Gran Torino solidified like this is his staple style. The whole veteran guy who doesn't give a crap about people, but he has this good intention to do good and right by people, despite circumstances.
yeah, and it's a directorial style that where it leans and really relies upon, again, the writing, the
Mhm.
characters, and the actors. And when they all gel really well, like an American Sniper, it gives you a very tense, like the audience is really a part of the story. They're really engaged in the story. They empathize with the characters. But then you have stuff like, you know, uh, the Mule, where maybe everything isn't quite up to snuff, and the filmmaking isn't really holding it up all that well. So Bradley Cooper is fine, but he's not really given a groundbreaking performance, and I think his character isn't given a whole lot really to work with there either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's serviceable. It's very serviceable, and in this sort of film, I'm like, it works, but it could use a lot. It could be edited better. It could be the characters could have been written a lot better too.
Yeah, I guess another comment I wrote down here is like, as part of the writing is like, I don't think anyone kind of understood who their characters were. Like even like the cartel actors, it felt like they were just like stand in for just cartel member one, cartel member two. And there wasn't a whole lot of character of like, why they're doing this, except for that one scene where he's asking, how do I text? And it's like, sure thing,
Oh my
Gramps.
god, those three guys in the like tire shop were actually pretty good.
I
Yeah,
love
like
those
They're
guys.
fun.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
at first I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be the same kind of just stereotype cartel acting that we see all the time. But then that became actually, I think, the good hallmark of like coming back to. I was like, okay, everyone's familiar with him. They like him. They're helping him with his phone. It's like, okay, there's little character moments like that worked. But everyone else, even Bradley Cooper, just felt like this is like your just cliche trope actor, just one dimensional, not a whole lot of depth to it. And maybe that's where I think a lot of the actors were just frustrated. I think like I was looking at some behind the scenes, like Bradley Cooper loved working with Eastwood. Fishburne likes working with Eastwood. All these guys do. I think whatever script or part they were given, there wasn't enough for them to work with. So
Do you guys have anything else you want to cover?
um I don't know if Eastwood's character was supposed to be racist.
Dude, I was gonna mention
Oh,
that too.
yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay.
They're
And
so-
this is part of kind of the wider conversation about
Mhm.
Eastwood's worldviews and in general. So his characters, I mean, I'm just thinking of Gran Torino, and then I'm thinking
Yeah.
about this
Yes.
one. He seems like a character who's out of place and out of time,
Mhm.
where he's used to just kind of dropping these racial slurs casually, but the character isn't like the character isn't like aggressively racist. He's just kind of like, oh, that's just the way we talk, kind of.
He's just casually
It,
racist.
yeah, but it's hard to tell, for me at least, how self-aware he is about it, because he's very
Mhm.
clearly, obviously doing it, and the characters around him are correcting him about it. Uh,
Mhm.
so like that shows a level of self-awareness where it's kind of like it's like, okay, it's just juxtaposing the fact that Eastwood is from a much different generation. He recognizes that, and his
Mhm.
characters are kind of out of place, and they
Mhm.
recognize that they are problematic and out of place. But then he also throws in stuff like complaining about cell phones and the internet, which just kind of feels like Clint Eastwood complaining about cell phones and the
Yeah,
internet.
okay. That was
Yeah.
one of my notes as well. Is
Mhm.
like this movie feels this feels like it was a movie where Clint Eastwood gets to say, "Bah, I don't like the internet," and like be casually racist and get away with it.
Yeah,
So
like like the internet stuff does feel like he's just kind of like complaining about it. The
yeah,
the
that's
racist
literally all
stuff
it is.
doesn't feel like like it doesn't quite feel like he's complaining that he can't talk like that anymore. But
Yeah,
because again, like the characters around him are kind of like, oh, you can't talk like that anymore, and his character doesn't go like, no, like when the black couple when he's helping them out,
yes,
and
Oh
they
love
yeah.
her.
correct him, and he doesn't go, you guys are just too sensitive. No, his character goes like, well, shit, I guess I can't anymore.
Yeah, I hated that scene so much.
No,
It was
no,
very
and
forced
there was no
scene.
place.
It was a terrible scene. It had no place to like. Anyway, but if you look at the script and you notice kind of that stuff, Joe, you had mentioned Gran Torino. It's written by the same guy,
Mhm.
so maybe it's not actually Eastwood. Maybe it's the dude who's not actually as old as Eastwood is.
Well, that's true, and Gran Torino. I mean, it's been a hot minute since I've seen Gran Torino, but I seem to remember that one having a lot of nuance in how it treated the characters and their relationship to race.
It balances itself out, but it does hit a lot of those at times. And that's one thing I've always kind of made a note about Eastwood movies is he does drop those from time to time. And I think he is doing it just to kind of like show this is a generational thing. But it comes to a point where like when you're trying to point out the error of that generation, like thinking that way and still wanting to talk like that, as opposed to just kind of like shooting it in a way where it almost is like pandering to that as well. Like I remember with Gran Torino, yeah, I dealt with like a Filipino families and like gang territory, but they wrote it with such cliche and such like they use those stereotypes. So I thought it doesn't make it for interesting writing. It feels like you're kind of like using stereotypes as a way of just making it funny or just pointing out the errors of that
It's a
thinking.
mixed
But
bag. It really is a mixed bag because I like that he went out of his way to show the guy who gets pulled over and is terrified of getting just shot on a routine
yeah.
pullover.
Mhm.
I like that because the scene was acknowledging, just the racism that occurs in situations like that, and it's not say. I mean, like the movie didn't make fun of the guy for being afraid. It was kind of like the guy was
No,
legitimately frightened. And I thought it worked. And then you'd also have a similar scene like when Clint Eastwood is leaving that diner with the
mhm,
two cartel guys, and they kind of get harassed by a cop. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, this stuff happens. But then also, I mean, that in that same scene, he kind of has a little bit of
yes.
like a white knight kind of thing. Like, here, I'm gonna, those guys are with me. They're helping.
Oh,
I'm
I
helping me
picked him
move
up at the Home
furniture or
Depot.
something.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
Come on.
and and
Exactly.
and and so it's like I think that Eastwood is like is or the writer or whoever everyone's involved is like it kind of feels like they're trying, but they're still from this generation that's so far removed that they don't quite know how to handle it.
Yeah.
I will also say another problem I had, just changing the subject off of this, is going back to the writing. There's something about the way they wrote just like a lot of the cartel scenes that I wasn't convinced with. For example, in the scene towards the third act, he's being forced to do this big run and he's being tracked. And then suddenly he says, well, he finds out his wife is dying and he decides, I'm going to stop the job and go see them. And the cartel's like, he's not answering his phone. It's been about a week. I'm like, dude, the cartel would not wait a week. With a shipment
No.
that big, they would not wait and they would not have been easy as they were with him. Like
Like, you got a few hours, bud.
yeah, at
I,
least a
I
few
I had
hours.
trouble believing that he just kind of disappeared and no one knew where to find him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other thing too, is like because like the guy that originally set him up for this job knew his daughter, and it's just like, how do you not just like go and trace? Like, you've known Eastwood
Exactly.
for like how long now? He's been running for how long? You don't know jack any about him? Like,
Mhm.
come on.
Yeah. So that was another problem I had kind of going back to the writing is as much as Eastwood's trying to kind of like show this is what the cartel underworld is like, it's like, dude, no, it is not. I know, and it frustrates me because the same writer did Narcos. He wrote stuff for Narcos, and that's much more believable than what this stuff was. And I don't know if this was Eastwood having his finger in the writing, saying, "No, I don't want you to write like this. This is going to happen." And probably the writer's like, "This wouldn't happen." But okay, Eastwood, I'll help. I'll make you happy.
Yeah, so I'll give this movie a mild recommendation. It's got a lot of issues. I mean, there's certainly if you're gonna watch a Clint Eastwood movie, there are many different better films that you can watch other than this one. That being said, if you're just kind of interested in the subject matter, elderly man runs drugs, it's serviceable. I mean, I finished it and I was like, yeah, I enjoyed that overall. Qualms and everything. I enjoyed myself. I'll probably never revisit it again unless I'm specifically going through a Clint Eastwood marathon. So yeah, if you're curious, I'd say it's worth a watch. But if you just want a good Clint Eastwood, you could certainly do better.
Yeah, I will say this. I was not a big fan of this, and a lot of it just comes down to not Eastwood as a director, but just the writing. This feels like one of his lesser and more rushed projects, and it reflects in the writing. And I feel like Eastwood, he has a lot of good intent of doing this. He has a lot of good intent of like why he wants to make this movie. I just think the final product that we get is very uncomfortable, very slow, very bland. And I almost feel like it doesn't feel believable. I feel like this is a good example of Hollywood writing that is so obvious and you're not convinced. And I like Eastwood, and I wish, as he gets older, he's got a lot more years under him, I hope. But I feel like this was not one of his more favorable ones. And I feel like, Joe, I agree with you. There's plenty more, dime a dozen Eastwood movies out there worth watching.
Yeah. I can't really recommend it, honestly. It's like Nate said, it is a pretty bland, kind of boring movie. There's not really, even when the story gets really kind of picks up and gets going, it's not really all that exciting to me. It's like I had mentioned at the very beginning, it is competently made, it is competently acted, it's fine on a technical level. The story is just kind of where it falls short in that it really kind of just jumps into a lot of stuff without really explanation, and just there's just a lot of like weird scenes that don't really add a whole lot to the general plot and whatnot. Yeah, I personally would just skip it. Like everyone said, there's better Clint Eastwood movies for sure. So just go watch those. And unless like you specifically want Clint Eastwood in this exact plot, there's no point to watch this.
Alrighty, and that will conclude this episode of the Film Illiterates podcast. Next week, it's going to be Nate's pick to turn a movie. Nate, have you picked a movie for us for next episode?
We're going to watch the French kind of avant-garde film, Holy Motors. So this will be an interesting watch. And I'll explore more like why we're going to watch this one in specifically.
All right.
Excellent. And so tune in next episode. We're going to talk about Holy Motors. You can find me on, you can find me and also other episodes of the Film Illiterates podcast and other videos on filmilliterates.com, on Twitter @filmilliterates, and on youtube.com/filmilliterates. Nate, where can people find you?
They can find me here at Film Illiterates. I do the podcast as well as the videos from time to time with Joe when I make it up there to Washington from time to time. But you can also follow me on Instagram at Nathan_Stone_films.
Alex?
We've got a lot of old videos, so check those out. Some old podcasts as well. But you can find me on Letterboxd, on Rate Your Music, on My Anime List, all under the name Half Scrim. HALFSCRIM.
And keep listening to episodes of our podcast, and keep watching movies, and keep it easy.